Is this thing on? Hello, hello? Uh-oh. Another yapper with a mic.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Napkin in Between podcast. I am your host, Dejanay Jones, but we might get a special guest host, Devontae, because I am sick as fuck. I've been sick as fuck for the past couple of days. I feel like absolute dick water, and my voice thinks that she is like on a Broadway show and is doing quick changes. So sometimes I sound like myself, and then sometimes Devontae comes out and I sound like somebody's son. I don't know. It happens extremely infrequently. But I just wanted to give y'all a heads up. Like, if you hear hella bass in my voice out of nowhere, it's still me. It's just Devontae wanted to come say hi. And you know what? We're just going to let Devontae do whatever the fuck he wants to do. Like, at this point, I don't know. So, I might be sick as fucking feeling down, but you know what is up? The city girls, because I got my hair done. That has been the peak of my week. One of two, actually. I have two peak of the weeks this week. First one is getting my hair done. I swear nothing makes life more worth living than getting your hair done. Like, hair appointment day is the best day. I struggle with getting up early. Always have, always will. But the two instances where I have no problem waking up at the crack ass of dawn is when I'm about to catch a flight and when I'm about to get my hair done. I feel like since I've moved to New York, I haven't really found the place that I want to go consistently to get my hair done. Like, it changes. Because I just haven't found that place where I'm really like, okay, like, you know, this is where I want to go. Girl, I think I found it. Like, the place that I went to get my hair done is called Jamila's Beauty Studio. It's in Harlem on West 116th. The service was immaculate. First of all, the booking was super easy, and they provide all the hair. So, like, the braiding hair and the curly pieces for this style all was included within the price, and the price was still affordable. I just got black because it was my first time going there. So, you know, I was like, let's just keep it simple. But they had so many different colors to pick from, and all of it was included in the service. And then on top of that, the stylist was so sweet, so accommodating, so skilled. So I would definitely be going back there. Any of my girls who are in New York City, check out Jamila's Beauty Studio. I'm not getting paid to promote this. This is just because I really liked it, and I will be going back, and hot girls don't gatekeep. So if you're looking for a braid studio in the city, Jamila's Beauty Studio, like I said, it is in Harlem on West 116th. Check them out because they're really, really good, and I would definitely be back. That was the first peak of my week. The second peak of my week, Galentine's with the girls. Me and a bunch of my girlfriends, we went to this place that we really like. It's all you can eat and drink sushi, $50 a person. Me and the girls had the best time, you know, just laughing, kikiing, having drinks, having sushi. Sushi is like one of my favorite foods in the world. Like, if I had to pick one thing to survive off of for the rest of my life, it would probably be sushi. Like, I feel like I could really survive off of sushi alone. I could probably figure out a way to make breakfast sushi, lunch and dinner sushi, dessert sushi. That sounds a little crazy, but I feel like I could figure it out if I only had to live off one thing for the rest of my life. The only thing is I'm really scared of trying sushi raw. So I've never tried raw sushi. I only eat the cooked sushi because in my brain, I feel like I know that it's raw. So I always feel like I'm gonna get sick. So I've never tried the raw sushi, but I kind of want to, but I have to take baby steps towards eating raw meats or not fully cooked meats. And I've made a little bit of baby steps because recently I've really been into eating steak. Like, it's bad. I probably eat steak at least 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes 4. Like, you're not supposed to eat that much red meat, but fuck the police. I don't care. I love steak. But I've always been the person who eats a well-done steak because I don't want to get sick. I'm so worried about it being a little bit raw and getting sick. I don't want to see any pink. I definitely don't want to see any red. Like, cook my shit completely. And I know what people say, like, oh, if you're going to eat well-done steak, just eat a hamburger. Literally, shut up. You're annoying me. But I've worked my way up to the point where now I eat medium rare steak. Like, first, I would do it like a little pink. And then I worked my way up until it's like red in the middle. And I'm not gonna lie, I get the hype now, okay? Like, I get it. Medium rare really is so much better. But I had to work my way up to that because I'm always afraid. So I feel like I can do that with sushi too. Hopefully, but we're not there yet. Right now, we're just gonna stick with the cooked sushi. But someday I'll probably try the raw. But for right now, like, leave me to the cooked sushi. But I just love sushi, and I love hanging out with the girls, and we had such a good Galentine's Day, and it was great. So yeah, those are definitely the peaks of my weeks, is finding a braiding salon that not only I like, but might be the recurring place that I go, and then sushi with the girls is always an amazing time. So I want to know the peak of your week. Please leave it in the comments. What did you do this week that grounded you, that made you smile, that kept you present in this very unserious, crazy times with everything that's going on? Moving along, and we'll bring on talk about today, I want to talk about the black man who took a very dangerous and big step into acquiring information on arguably the biggest known hate group in the world. So in 1978, there was a detective in Colorado Springs named Ron Stallworth. He was a new detective in the Colorado Springs Police Department, and also he was the first black detective in the Colorado Springs Police Department. So one day he's at work sitting at his desk reading the local newspaper, and he sees in the classified section there is an announcement of a new chapter of the KKK in Colorado Springs, and is encouraging people to apply to the new chapter. So there's a P.O. box in the announcement in the newspaper, and this detective, Ron Stallworth, writes to the P.O. box that he's interested in more information. He submits his letter saying that he wants more information, and he also writes the undercover phone line so that, they have something to call to give him more information. So about a week later, he gets a call on the undercover phone line. He answers the phone, and the person on the other end is like, is this Ron Stallworth? And he kind of forgot that he had sent this letter for more information. So he's like, who the hell is calling me on this undercover line? But he's like, yeah, this is Ron Stallworth. Who am I speaking to? And the person on the other side of the call says, this is the president of the Colorado Springs chapter of the KKK. We got your letter requesting more information. And then that's when he's like, oh shit, I put my real name on this application. I watched an interview of his, and he says that was an honest mistake, but it was a mistake that could have blown his cover from the very beginning. Thankfully, it didn't. He was able to play it off. He starts talking to this man who is the chapter president of Colorado Springs division of the KKK, and the president is asking him, why do you want to join the Klan? So Ron Stallworth responds, and he says he hates blacks. He uses the N-word. And then he says he also hates Jews, Mexicans, and Asians, but he uses the racial slurs for all those groups of people. And then he also says that his sister, who is a white woman, is dating this black man, and every time the black man puts his filthy black hands on his sister, it makes him cringe. The response that he got from the Klan president is, you're just the guy we're looking for, when can we meet? So now he's like, oh fuck, because obviously he's a black man, he cannot meet this person. So they arrange a meeting for a week in advance, and after he hangs up the phone, he goes to his sergeant. He tells his sergeant about the classified ad he saw, him writing to the P.O. box, the call that he had just had, and, all of that. The sergeant laughs at him. He doesn't think that he's serious at first, but then when he realizes that he's serious, he's like, okay, well, how do you want to handle this? And Ron says, I want to take this as far as we can. I want someone to go undercover. So he mentions an undercover officer, one that he had trained recently in narcotics that he wants to use. So his sergeant tells him to go to the lieutenant in narcotics, tell him what had happened and who he wants to use for this undercover investigation. He goes to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant is immediately like, no. He tells him he's not going to use, the man's name was Chuck. Well, that's the name of the officer. He's not going to let him use Chuck because once Chuck goes to the meeting in person, they're going to be able to tell Ron on the phone versus Chuck in person posing as Ron Stallworth. And so Ron Stallworth is like, well, what do you mean by that? Ho, are you cool? Because we all knew what he meant, but he was just like, it's not going to work. I'm not wasting a good undercover officer on idiots running around in white sheets. So Ron is like, okay. He goes back to his sergeant and tells the sergeant what happened. And the sergeant is like, okay, well, what do you want to do now? Ron says he wants to take it all the way to the chief. So Ron and his sergeant go to the chief. He explains to the chief, what he's done. The chief at first doesn't think he's serious either. And then when he realizes that Ron is serious, he's like, okay, so what do you want to do? He tells the chief how he wants to use the undercover officer in narcotics. The lieutenant said no. So the chief goes to the lieutenant and tells the lieutenant to give Ron anything that he wants for this investigation. Obviously, the lieutenant did not like that, but at the end of the day, what the chief says goes. So then Ron is able to use the undercover police officer that he had first wanted to use. So he fills him in on the conversation that he had with the chapter president, because in order for this to work, they had to be on the same page completely. Any conversations that Ron, the actual Ron, had on the phone, he had to tell them to the Ron, the undercover officer who was going to go in person, and vice versa, so that there were no slip-ups and the Klan members didn't realize what was actually happening. So he fills him in on everything that happened on the phone and about the meeting a week later. So then a week later, they strap him up with a wire to record the conversation, and they send the undercover Ron to the meeting. I'm going to refer to these two people as undercover Ron and real Ron to keep them separate. So undercover Ron is the officer Chuck, the undercover officer who was going to the meetings because he's a white man. Real Ron is Ron Stallworth, the black detective who started this whole investigation, but obviously can't go to the meetings because he's black. So a week later, undercover Ron goes to meet the Klan president, who, I don't know if I said this, But when real Ron was on the phone with him for the initial call, he learned that he was an active military member who was stationed at Fort Carson, a U.S. military base a little bit south of Colorado Springs. So undercover Ron goes to meet him. Real Ron is close by in a car, basically staked out so that he could hear their conversation. So once undercover Ron gets there, they tell him that this is a part of their security clearance and they actually have to go to a different location in order to talk to him about joining the Klan. Undercover Ron tries to talk his way out of that and stay at the location because real Ron explained in an interview that when you're working undercover, you want to maintain as much control of a situation as possible. So once you decide on a meeting place, you don't really want to leave that meeting place because undercover work is already dangerous, but going to a place that hasn't been decided on by the person working undercover makes it even more dangerous. So undercover Ron is trying to, convince them to stay at this location. He isn't able to do it, so they leave to go to another location. Thankfully, real Ron in the car is able to follow them to the new location and be there with undercover Ron. So at this meeting, they're talking about, the Klan and why undercover Ron wants to join the Klan. And he's given the same reasons like, oh, I hate black people, Jews, Asians, whatever. And so after this meeting, they give him a brochure with more information about the Klan and also an application. And so they explain to him that in the application, you have to fill it out, submit it, and it has to be approved before you can participate in any Klan activity such as cross burning or anything like that. And so during this meeting, he's asking them, trying to get more information, like what is their goal? What do they hope to gain from this new chapter? And they explain to him that David Duke, who was the Grand Wizard of the Klan at the time, was coming to visit in a few months, and they wanted to have enough people in the Klan by the time David Duke got there so that they could do a march down Nevada Avenue. Nevada Avenue was one of the main streets in downtown Colorado Springs, and so they wanted to do a huge march down that street where they would get a lot of attention because of local businesses and it being one of the main streets in Colorado Springs, so that the people of Colorado could know of their presence in the city. And so undercover Ron gets all this information, takes his application packet back to the police department. Real Ron has to fill it out because he's the one who sent the initial letter about wanting information, so the handwriting had to match. And so he fills out the application, sends it in. Several weeks go by and his application hasn't been approved, and again, he can't participate in any activities like cross burning or anything like that until he is approved. So all he can do is send undercover Ron to their meetings, but he can't participate in anything else because he hadn't been approved. So after a couple weeks of waiting on his card, he decides that he's going to call David Duke's office so that he can see what's going on with his application. So he calls the office. To his surprise, David Duke himself answers the phone. And this really threw him off because he wasn't expecting to speak to David Duke directly. But he says to David Duke, like, I submitted my application a couple weeks ago. I haven't heard back anything and I can't participate in any activities until my application is approved. Like, can you check on it, or is there a way to, get my application approved? So while he's on the phone, he says that he can hear shuffling in the background and he hears David Duke pull his application, and David Duke says that he himself is going to check over his application and approve it, and he should get his card within the next couple of days. 3 or 4 days after this phone call, he gets his card from David Duke that says that he is an active member of the Ku Klux Klan. Can you fucking imagine what was going through this man's head? This black man, Ron Stallworth, detective, getting a card with his name on it because, again, he accidentally used his real name when he submitted the first letter asking for more information about the Klan. He now has this card. He is a card-carrying member for the KKK as a black man. As long as you say the right things, these white supremacists are the easiest fucking people to manipulate because they're so fucking stupid. Literally, all you have to do is use a couple racial slurs and they're like, sign this one up. Sign him up. This reminds me of that black woman who posed as a Trump supporter in order to promote her GoFundMe, and they sent her all this money for her GoFundMe. Whole time she wasn't a Trump supporter. She just said that she was. They don't check shit and sent her all this money. Even Ron Stallworth himself said that during this whole investigation, which was like 6 or 7 months, there were multiple times that he would be on the phone with David Duke. This man is talking to a black man and he had no fucking clue. And Ron Stallworth asked him, like, are you ever afraid that some like smart aleck black person might try to call and get information on the KKK? And David Duke's response was like, oh, I can always tell the difference between a black man and a white man. He's using racial slurs, by the way. He's not saying black man. He's saying hard ER. And Ron is like, okay, well, how can you tell the difference? And he's like, just by the way they speak. Like, you are an educated white man and you speak like an educated white man, But black people, they're not as educated, and so they don't speak like we speak. And Ron is like, okay, well, can you give me an example? And he goes, take the word are, for example. Educated men like you and I, we say are like are, the way it's supposed to be said. But a black person will say ara. So if you ever are on the phone with someone and you're not sure who you're talking to, get them to say the word are, and that'll be a sign whether you're talking to an educated white person or a black person. And so after that conversation, Ron said that every time he was on the phone with David Duke, which he called David Duke 2 or 3 times a week, he said, during this entire investigation. Sometimes to get information, sometimes to just talk to him. And every time that he would be on the phone with him, he would say, like, how are you? How are the wife and kids? And David Duke never picked up on the fact that he had changed the way that he was saying are. The stupidest group of fucking people in the world. Anyway, so now Ron Stallworth, a black man, is an official member of the KKK. He gets a little membership card, which he carries in his wallet, and then he also gets a certificate of membership, which he said he hung in his office at the police department while he was there until he retired. Undercover Ron is going to the meetings in person. So now, as an active member of the KKK, Ron Stallworth is able to stop not only events in the Colorado Springs area, but in other parts of the U.S. as well. So, for example, if he was on the phone with David Duke and he was talking about, like, we're going to have a cross burning in this city, he was then able to call the police department in that city, give them a heads up on what was happening so that they could up their police presence, and then they wouldn't do those things. This also happened several times right in Colorado Springs. They were planning cross burnings and marches, and Ron Stallworth was able to stop those by upping the police presence in the parts of town where they were planning those things. And mind you, several times in Colorado Springs and in other cities, they were planning events, and they would talk to Ron Stallworth, either undercover or real, about these events. These events would be thwarted because he would let other police departments know, or they would up the police presence in Colorado Springs, and they never caught on to why this was happening. Like, they're so filled with hate, there's no room for any type of education, logic, or critical thinking. Sense is chasing them, but they are much faster. So as they're developing this chapter of the KKK in Colorado Springs, they eventually get to 14 members. And of these 14 members, there were only 2 or 3 who weren't active military personnel stationed at Fort Carson. There was actually a point in time in this investigation where it was found that 2 of the people that were a part of the Colorado Springs chapter of the KKK were top military specialists and worked for NORAD. If you're unfamiliar with NORAD, that is the North American Aerospace Defense Command. These people have special clearances, work at the top levels of the military, and are also active members of the KKK. And I know that probably shouldn't be surprising because racist people and the KKK are in all parts of our government, but like, fuck. I don't know. I'm always going to be a little surprised when I find out that racist people are running crazy parts of our government. And maybe not surprised. Maybe surprised isn't the right word. It's more like shook. You know what I mean? Like, it's not surprising, but like, it leaves me shook because what the fuck? So these 2 people who work at NORAD are found to be members of the KKK. Those people were immediately fired and their special clearances were taken. But this investigation continues. Real Ron is continuing to talk on the phone to David Duke a couple times a week. Undercover Ron is continuing to go to meetings. They're continuing to stop activities that are planned, like cross burnings. They also wanted to try to plan a bombing of 2 gay bars in Colorado, which were just in talks. Being as though most of these members were in the military and stationed at Fort Carson, they were trying to steal weapons and things from the military base, but none of that was ever able to happen. There was talks of bombings, but it never really came to fruition. But now we get to the point where David Duke is coming to visit Colorado Springs. And there were credible threats to his life while he was in Colorado Springs, and the Colorado Springs Police Department chief didn't want David Duke to be killed while he was in the city. So he goes to Real Ron, who's been talking to David Duke on the phone for several months at this time, and assigns him to security detail of David Duke. Real Ron and his sergeant argue against this because they're like, he's been talking to David Duke on the phone. David Duke might realize who he is. Like, why can't you use someone else to be his security? And the chief is like, you're the best person for this job. I want you to do this. I feel like the chief is a little fucking shady for that. Because you know what the fuck going on. You're the one who okayed this entire investigation. And now everyone's cover could be blown because you want to assign Real Ron to be David Duke's security detail. And Real Ron and his sergeant are explaining all of this to the chief. Like, this jeopardizes this entire investigation. And the chief is like, I understand that, but I want to send Ron to be his security detail. So Ron is like, okay, like at the end of the day, he's going to do his job. And so he goes to David Duke and he says, I'm a detective. He doesn't say his name, obviously. So he says, I'm a detective and I've been assigned to basically be your security guard while you're in Colorado Springs. He says to him, like, I don't agree with, you know, your thoughts, your ideologies, but I will make it my mission to ensure your safety to the best of my ability. So he's now security for David Duke while he's in Colorado Springs. They're at this luncheon. David Duke is giving this talk, spouting his racist white supremacy ideologies. Mind you, because he's a member of the KKK, undercover Ron is at this talk listening to David Duke. He sees Real Ron pull up and he's like, what the fuck is going on? Because Real Ron didn't have any time to let undercover Ron know, hey, the chief has assigned me to be security for David Duke. So they have to essentially communicate with their eyes. I love girlhood. And Real Ron has to let him know, like, everything's fine, like, we're good. So the luncheon goes fine, and David Duke doesn't realize who Real Ron is. And so once Real Ron realizes that the investigation isn't going to be compromised, he's like, I'm going to have a little fun with this. So he takes a camera with him, and he goes to David Duke, and he's like, you know, no one will believe that I was working as your security. Like, can we have a picture together? David Duke agrees to a picture. Real Ron asks undercover Ron to take the picture. So they're getting ready to take this photo. Real Ron is in the middle, David Duke is on one side, and the president of the Colorado Springs KKK chapter is on the other side. And so Ron puts his arms out like this for the audio listeners. He basically puts his arms around David Duke and the president. So he has his hand on the shoulder of David Duke on one side, and then the president, his hand is on his shoulder as well. David Duke pushes Ron's arm off of his shoulder, and he's like, I'm sorry, but I can't be seen in a photo with you like that. So Ron is like, okay, no problem, I understand. He goes up to undercover Ron, and he's like, when you hear me say 3, snap the photo. So they get back in line, and Ron has his arms down, and he goes 1, 2, 3, and puts his arms back as he says 3, and undercover Ron snaps the photo. David Duke realizes what he's done. He tries to rush to the camera to get the photo because it's a film camera, and Ron rushes at the same time, a little bit quicker than David Duke, and snatches the photo. So he has the photo in his hand. David Duke is pissed as fuck, and he's trying to grab the photo. And Ron says to him, if you touch me, I will arrest you for assault on an officer, and you will spend 5 years in prison. Ron Stallworth is a fucking badass. Like, can you imagine? I know David Duke was fuming. I know that man was mad as fuck, but Ron Stallworth is a police officer, so if you touch him, you're going to jail. So David Duke doesn't try to get the photo anymore. He just walks away. And Ron Stallworth said that he kept this photo for years. He moved a little bit in between Colorado Springs and other places, and somewhere in one of his moves, he lost the photo. But enough people in Colorado Springs seen the photo to know that it was real. And at one point, years later, him and David Duke were on the phone, and David Duke acknowledged that the photo existed. During the visit of David Duke is when they wanted to have this march down Nevada Avenue. Thankfully, they didn't have it because they did not have enough members. They wanted it to be like this huge march where they were like shoulder to shoulder going down the street, and they just didn't have enough members to do it. So David Duke leaves Colorado. They continue the investigation. Real Ron is on the phone talking to him, and the chapter president, undercover Ron, is going to the meetings. It gets to the point within the chapter that the chapter president wants to step down because he's in the military. He moves around a lot. He's not as consistent. And so they're trying to figure out who should become the new president of the KKK in the Colorado Springs chapter. They all unanimously nominate Ron Stallworth to be the president of the Colorado Springs chapter of the KKK. How fucking crazy is this? They nominated a black man to be president of the KKK for Colorado Springs. What the fuck? So Real Ron and undercover Ron go to the chief and they tell him about, the nomination and how they want to accept it, because as the chapter president, he could get way more information about not only what was happening in Colorado Springs, but KKK chapters all over the US. So they go to the chief, they tell him about the nomination and everything, and out of nowhere, the chief tells them that he wants them to shut the investigation down. He says that it's gone too far. They need to change the undercover line phone number, and they need to destroy all the evidence and all of the reports about this investigation. Real Ron and undercover Ron are like, what the fuck? Like, why would we just stop this investigation when we're getting to, the real meat and potatoes of it? If Ron Stallworth was the president of the Klan, he could find out so much information, more information than they were already finding out. And the chief is like, I don't want this to get out because I'm worried about the image from the public once they find out that 2 of our officers were a part of the KKK. And Real Ron is like, the public will praise us because we've stopped cross burnings and they wanted to plan a bombing of a gay bar. Like, they'll praise us. They'll congratulate us for the work that we've done. And the chief is like, I don't want this to get out. You need to stop this investigation and destroy all the evidence. Ron is continuing to, argue with the chief. His sergeant is like squeezing his knee, basically telling him to shut up. After a little bit of arguing, the chief is not budging, and so Ron is like, okay, we'll stop the investigation. And he goes to his office to destroy the reports and everything. So he destroys a couple of the reports, and his fellow officer leaves his office. Once he's sure that his fellow officer isn't coming back, he takes all of the evidence from this investigation, puts it in his car, goes home, and keeps all of the evidence. And from this evidence is where he was able to write his book, which is The BlacKkKlansman. And the book was also turned into the movie, The BlacKkKlansman. But the fact that the chief was so adamant about immediately stopping the investigation right when he was about to become the president, it don't sit right with me. Something's fishy, no Nemo. You know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering if maybe he had some ties to the KKK, or he knew people who had ties to it and he did not want that information to get out, so he said, shut this shit down. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, because it's like, you were co-signing this entire investigation, so why all of a sudden do you not want it to continue? It doesn't make sense. But thankfully, Ron Stallworth was able to keep, the reports and some of the evidence from the investigation. He was able to write his book, and then now there's the movie of it as well. And some people have questioned this investigation. They're like, okay, well, what did you accomplish? Who did you arrest? And Ron Stallworth's answer is well, we didn't arrest anybody because this wasn't a criminal investigation. It was an intelligence investigation. They gained a lot of intelligence. They learned about Klans members who were at top parts of the military. They stopped cross burnings. They would have been able to stop the bombing of gay bars. They did a lot so that minorities were not terrorized by the activities of the KKK. All of this, mind you, while actively risking his life, because had this blown up and had their covers been blown and they had realized that it was a black man behind all of this, you know what they would have done. Because Ron was on several calls with the president of the KKK where he would express his want to kill black people. And so if they would have found out that they were being played by a black man, they would have killed him. And so I just think that it's really admirable of Ron Stallworth to put his life on the line, to gain intelligence about the KKK, and to help protect the minorities that were in Colorado Springs and minorities in other cities as well. So with all that being said, I just wanted to bring more attention to Ron Stallworth and his investigation and how he was able to find out so much information about the KKK. If you would like more information about Ron Stallworth and his story, he does have a book. It is called The BlacKkKlansman. And then there's also the movie, The BlacKkKlansman, which is based off of this true story and his book as well. Okay, I'm done talking. I hope today's episode was educational. I hope everyone is having a great day, except for that orange drink lady. And I will see you in the next episode. Peace and love. Talk to you later.
The Napkin in Between, hosted by Dejanay Jones, produced by Dejanay Jones, post-production by Dejanay Jones, music by Sam Champagne, and graphics by Isma Vidal. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next episode.